Good morning. It is Friday, September 27th, 2019. This is our weekly chats that we do and a weekly webinar. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have a pretty good schedule here, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, trying to keep in touch, as well as some regular chat on the chat board, even when I'm moving. So I moved this week, and it was horrific. I had been planning to move for quite a while, so I had the house pretty much pared down. I had a 1,400 square foot house, and side by side, and everything that goes in the basement besides. I now have everything I own in one bedroom, which is being used as an office, and then I get the closet for my clothes, and 6 shelves in the basement. So I got rid of all of my furniture with the exception of a bookshelf and a file cabinet. I got rid of a third of my stuff that I threw away, and half of what's left I gave away. So I probably pared down what I owned, my stuff, what George Carlin would call our stuff, by about 70%. And I'll tell you what, it's somewhat liberating. Somewhat scary at the same time. Luckily, my girlfriend, whom I've moved in with, and like I said, I hinted at some other things before. She has a nice place. It's only 1,100 square feet, so we are squeezing in here. But given that we like to travel and we don't want to spend a lot on real estate at this point in the cycle, it should work out. So let's talk about economics. Let's talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. And let's talk about some of the impacts on investing going forward. First off, market's been choppy for a while, and now we have an impeachment proceeding. And the question that I think that we should ask is, how important is this? Now, I got into a little bit of trouble earlier in the year because several people, actually a few dozen, were upset with me for being very political. And I don't know that's true, but I'll be very honest. I don't like the far right any more than I like the far left. So it just happens that we have a Republican president, and so he was getting the brunt of the criticism. Now, for folks who have known me a while, you'll know that I wasn't easy on Barack Obama either. I have always felt that he made some mistakes in Iran. Not that we're doing any better right now, but that we didn't stand up to China when we could have earlier. So there's a lot of things that President Trump is trying to address that I agree with. He's trying to address. Don't like the methods. So I've not been a friend to either party when it comes to my criticism. But my ultimate goal is to figure out how that impacts our money. And I once told a cousin who was talking about all these secondary issues on which he votes. And I said to him, I vote based on 2 things. I vote based on who might get us into a war that we shouldn't be in, and who might crush the economy, who might cause a recession. And if I think that either candidate is better with regard to war and peace, then followed by the economy, then none of the other issues really matter that much to me. I care about wars, I care about the economy, and if those 2 things are good, if we're avoiding unnecessary wars, and if the economy is good, and it's going to stay good, then we can move on to all these other tertiary issues. So, what's really going on in Washington right now that would have me concerned? Well, Donald Tusk here gave a speech, and he is a former prime minister of Poland, and he's butted heads with President Trump. And he gave a speech where he said something that resonated with me, and I'm going to bring it up because I'm going to lead into some other things here. And I know that a few of you are going to say, just talk about investments. Well, this gets there. I always get there. These macro views, these political observations, I think in the context of history are very important. When somebody like this guy, Donald Tusk, president of the European Council, comes out and talks about fake leaders who use lies to stay in permanent power, and directs it at the president of the United States, he didn't use his name, but it was clearly directed at the president of the United States. I think that as Americans, we should be concerned. Because as the leaders in the world, which we clearly are, anything that diminishes our influence, that diminishes the respect of the nation by the rest of the world, is bad for our future. We want to be the leaders. We want to be respected. But if that goes away, a lot of other things go away. And the thing that we should be most concerned about is, what if somehow they replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency? We're pretty far off from that. I know people have been talking about it for a decade. I think we're still quite a ways away. But what if that becomes an accelerated theme? What if there's such fractured relations around the world that the current international trade and monetary systems fall apart? We seem to be moving in that direction. And a lot of this is at the policy from the policy of the administration. So these trade wars have proven to neither be easy to win nor fast. And that is a problem that we are probably going to have to deal with regardless of whether President Trump wins next year or not, or is in power much longer. I think, and I had a Facebook post up here earlier, I had asked a question on Facebook, and I posed it as a hypothetical regarding what's going on with the Ukraine. And I said something along the lines of, if the president of the United States went to another country and threatened them with lack of support and withdrawing funding and not supporting them militarily in things that we had already committed to, unless they investigated a political rival, how would you feel about that? And you can imagine the firestorm that erupted on my Facebook page. And I made a comment. I said, it's kind of funny that these sorts of things never devolve into policy discussions. It became personal between a few people, and I think that that's a problem. The fact that we can't discuss policy and politics without getting very personal should tell us that we're not doing it right. So when I go into this discussion of what's going on in Washington, D.C., I want you to take it not personally, but as analytical and with a historic perspective. And think about, do you really believe in the Constitution? Or have you just said it in the past and now you're making exceptions because the person who's violating the Constitution quite clearly and violating other dimensions of the law happens to be in the party that you generally support? So my disclaimer here that I'll throw in, I have worked for both Republicans and Democrats. I lean libertarian. Why? Because I think good government is a lean government that focuses on the big issues. I believe that most public policy can be influenced by smart regulation and smart and fair tax policy. I believe that international trade is vitally important. not only because of the bottom line numbers, but because it spreads influence. I believe that America should have a role in the world internationally, mainly because we are one of the safest places on the planet, and we're very powerful. So if we can promote peace and freedom and a march towards higher living standards, we should do that. Not only because it's good for them, but because it's good for us. When people have higher standards of living around the world, they're less likely, and every statistic shows this, on crime and on war and on deaths and on murders and crime. Every statistic shows that when people have something to protect, they don't go out and cause trouble with other people. That's true at the national level too. Countries where people have high standards of living typically don't want to get into wars. The United States has proven to be a little bit of an exception to that, actually. But throughout most of the world, high standards of living reduce the likelihood of crime and war. The United States, as the peacekeeper de facto, sometimes steps into conflicts that maybe we shouldn't. Some conflicts we should step into. You know how I feel about Iran. I think we should have bombed them 8 years ago and sent in special forces when they had their fledgling revolution that was crushed by the Ayatollah. I think that's one of President Barack Obama's biggest failures. I think that not having a robust response to Iran bombing Saudi Arabia would be a failure. So we'll see. And that doesn't mean I believe in boots in the ground necessarily, but a massive strike on military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and a little bit of oil infrastructure as payback, that would be sensible and strategic in a way that probably would dissuade Iran from causing more trouble and finally push them to the table. It may even signal that we would support another uprising. So all of these things, they tend to weave themselves together, right? It's a tangled web that we weave. And when we have a president who, in my opinion, very callously flaunts the law, I think we have a problem. I think that what's going on right now is probably going to lead to an impeachment, at least at the House of Representatives. And I think that it's probably close to 50-50 that you get 17 or 18 Republican senators to flip on President Trump. Why would that happen? Well, the first thing is that the extortion of the Ukrainian president is monumentally constitutionally flawed. Asking a foreign leader to investigate a political rival and holding money and military support over their head to get that done is so over the top that I don't believe it's ever happened before. It is illegal, and it is, in fact, a violation of the Constitution at least two different junctures. So, will people become outraged, or will they fall back on but Hillary's emails, or pretend corruption from the Obama administration, which, even with their failures, was about as clean as it gets? So, I would urge you to allow yourself to be persuaded by evidence as it comes out. Because I've read just about everything that's been public so far. And I've watched the interviews. And I believe that we're about to enter a constitutional crisis. Does that mean the stock market will crash? Well, we've talked about this in the past. I believe that President Trump is 85 to 90% likely to lose in a re-election bid against Joe Biden, against Elizabeth Warren, almost anybody. So somebody decided to post, it used to be that one is innocent until proven guilty. Well, that is what an impeachment proceeding is for. And if the evidence bears out that President Trump didn't do anything wrong, then so be it. But we have transcripts already, and it turns out that the whistleblower is a CIA officer. These are also people sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States and look out for the best interest of the United States. Common sense, I think, can analyze what President Trump said. And we largely know what he said. Also, and I think what might be a bigger deal is that President Trump is asking for the whistleblower's identity and made a veiled threat on his life. If you haven't been paying attention to that, for the President of the United States to make a veiled threat on the life of a whistleblower is not only illegal on its face, it violates several laws, including 1997, I believe 1997, whistleblower statutes. But for a president to do that is just unbelievable to me. So the question is, will this become so over the top that even the Republicans throw President Trump under the bus? I believe that it's at least 50-50 that happens now. And I said about 2 years ago that once the tax cuts for the rich got passed, Republicans would have a lot less tolerance for President Trump. And that is happening now. So while you have those who have gotten elected in districts that are sympathetic to President Trump, because again, I have said this before, there is the whole shake up Washington, D.C. thing that's very powerful, especially in the Midwest. And I don't disagree with that. I think Washington, D.C., and you've heard me rail on the East Coast, they need to be woken up to the fact that they're not the only people in the world. That people throughout America live different lifestyles, are happy, and don't like to get, for lack of a better word, shit on every time the East Coast messes up the economy, and generally, they're the ones that do it. Derivatives, stupid tax policy, stupid regulatory policy, a focus on a couple of mega cities. I get it. But this idea that a president can try to extort political aid from a foreign leader and then threaten a whistleblower, I think it's very likely that you see the Republicans give up on President Trump in the not too distant future, if in fact he did those things. And to me, it's pretty obvious that he did that. So somebody says Biden is on record as threatening to withhold money from Ukraine. Okay, so here's the thing. You don't know what you're talking about. All right? You don't know what you're talking about. I have these all queued up and ready to go. This idea that the Bidens need to be investigated is so monumentally stupid and distorted that if you don't do the research and you just listen to facts and the talking points, you're shortchanging your own intelligence. There were international sanctions and pushes to get corruption cleaned up in the Ukraine. This article from NPR makes it so simple. But in short, Russia had a president in Ukraine. He got removed, but there was remnants of his administration that didn't clean up corruption. Hunter Biden didn't get involved with that gas company until way after the malfeasances, and he went in there to help clean things up. But there was a prosecutor who wouldn't investigate a couple of people who had basically laundered money like the Russian oligarchs did and have been doing out of Russia. So the U.S. administration, with Joe Biden appointed to run this, pushed to have a different special prosecutor put in. In the United States, and it's, Biden's the one that delivered the message, but it was U.S. policy that was supported and created by our diplomatic corps and supported by the president, told them, hey, if you don't get rid of this special prosecutor and appoint a new one who will actually do the investigations, we're not going to give you any money anymore. So understand the context of the story. They're trying to take that one line that Chris here threw out there and turn it into a story, because people won't study the context and they won't understand what's going on. Don't get fooled. I've been right about everything I've said about President Trump. Everything. That he would get elected, that he would pass a very favorable tax cut for himself, that he would use the office of the presidency to make money for himself, that he would start a trade war, that he would start a trade war, and that it wouldn't work out so good. These aren't things that I'm talking about now. These are things that I talked about a very long time ago. So not only did I predict that he would win and why he would win, I'm in the Midwest. I understand why he won. I just described it a minute ago. There's a lot of irritation with the East Coast. Threats and opportunities under President Trump. This was written over 2 years ago. The nationalist impulse, which has always led to war. This idea that globalism is not good. It is. That's how the United States got wealthy the last 50 years. And it led to more peace. He had to figure out a solution for healthcare and the slow growth forever scenario. So far, his only real ideas have been to cut taxes on the rich and lower interest rates to nothing. He hasn't had a healthcare idea other than get rid of what we got. Debt. We're going up in debt, $1 trillion a year. I predicted that he'd raise the debt a lot during an economic expansion. Iran and terrorism. I'm a hawk on this, and I still don't like the way he's doing things. So, and pretty much hit most of this, with the exception of the oil stocks have still not rallied. So, in any case, if you don't believe that the President of the United States can be impeached, including in the Senate, then you are not doing your proper risk management as an investor. You are allowing your belief that it can't happen or that it shouldn't happen or both to take you away from the facts that there's an impeachment proceeding going on that's not based on oral sex, right? This is real stuff. This is working with a foreign government to undermine the political process, which is a violation of the Constitution and the law, and then making veiled threats against a whistleblower, which is against the law. I've discussed how we've allowed him to not be presidential. Are we going to allow him to not follow the law? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But in my travel around the country, and this is the same way that I figured out that he was going to win, I've been able to figure out that he'd probably lose in re-election. So if he gets impeached, say in the next 3 or 4 months, would that impact the investment climate for us? And I think the answer is yes. I think it would accelerate a lot of the timeline that I've laid out. Whereas I thought the end of next year could look like the end of 2018, it could be accelerated. So my point is, and in the chat, you can see that people jump on the political aspects and the self-rationalizations and the personal views, and they make a lot of things personal, but they don't take a step back and say, well, as an investor, what could this mean? Okay, separate your views, right? This is how to do analysis. Be introspective, and then back up, and then say, okay, if this happens, then what? And then ask, what are the odds that this could happen? The odds of President Trump getting impeached, I'm telling you, are no worse than 50-50 at this point. And I say that because what's out already is pretty damning. The fact that they tried to cover this up by moving it to a classified server, and this is a big deal actually, off of the servers where transcripts are generally kept. I mean, it was not a classified conversation, but they moved it somewhere where it wouldn't get noticed, hopefully. And only because a CIA officer reported it did we know. The CIA officer probably found out from administration officials. Think about that. What direction are things going? I've hypothesized that Mike Pence could resign and make a very damning speech about President Trump. If he feels threatened about his political future because of the actions of President Trump, what would his response be? It would be to distance himself from President Trump. What better way to do that than resign and tell people why you're resigning? At least then he could go run for Senate or Congress or House of Representatives or governor or something. Again, the risks are real. They're out there. It doesn't matter that I think that the guy is a schmuck and a con man and kind of delusional and not really that smart, and that his policies are horrible. None of that matters. All that matters right now is, if this happens, what does that mean to the markets and to your investments? And I want you to think about that because it's important. Oops, I didn't want to close that one. So let's talk about some investments. I've told you that in the future, environmental, social, and governance issues were going to take a higher priority for investors. And way back when corporations first were introduced to the United States, corporation had to have a charter that demonstrated a public need for the company, a public mission. I don't know that, and that went away around a little before World War I. It started going away. It was pretty much gone, and profit motive became the number one issue for companies. So I want you to understand that history too, is that profit above all else is relatively new, right? Really post World War II. Since the 1920s, I guess, post World War I. Before that, corporations had fundamental responsibilities. And I think that that's going to start coming back. I don't know that it'll be quite the way that it was, but there will probably be some regulatory aspects to it. I've been pretty sick this week, so not only was I moving, I did it with 101 fever and coughing. Somebody at a poker tournament, I think, probably sneezed on me. So Clearbridge talks about ESG principles, and I bring this up because that too will will impact. I'm the infected one. Impact our future investments. So if you get a chance to read this article over at MarketWatch, right? I think you should. It's pretty important. Now, I'd like you to ask yourself a question. If this is the wave of the future, but the president and Congress are fighting right now, what are the odds that they're going to work on any of this stuff? Probably not real high. So solar stocks, along with a lot of other groups, have gotten beat up in the last few weeks, right? That's actually maybe the last week. So SunPower, take a look at the monthly chart. Stock had a good rally. Last couple months, investment fell off. The weekly chart is starting to head down. The daily chart had a fall, rallied, fell back again. The stock is closer to being oversold than overbought. Right in the middle on the weekly. Right? Well, how do we feel about the middle of the market? Kind of in the middle on the monthly too. So, what would I be doing with SunPower, which has really been doing a good job on commercial installations? Well, right here, we talked about this just a couple of weeks ago. It looks like it's filling that gap. It looks like it probably did it today. So now this gap got filled. And the question to ask is, does it have to come all the way back to here and fill that gap? I don't think so. I think with SunPower, you're probably in a spot right now with today's volatility that you could probably sell like $11 puts. Probably get $1, right? Let's pull up the NASDAQ options chain. SunPower. Google's pretty cool for this. So got it. So let's take a look at the December puts. $11 puts, you can get over $1 for right now. So that means the stock would have to fall about 5% to have it put to you, and you'd be getting about a 10% premium. So that means you can make about 10% over the next 3 months holding cash that would have to buy SunPower if it dropped 5%. And the way the chart looks is it's probably a pretty good deal. Now, could SunPower go down to 8 or 9 again? Absolutely it could. But SunPower is a stock that I told you about at $5 and $6 and $7 a share that I think probably can go to 100 or more in the next 5, 6, 7 years. I've said that about other stocks. I actually want to show you a couple of charts. So let's take a look at exact sciences. I was telling people way back here, exact sciences could go to 100. Gradually got there. I sold a bunch of it here. Started buying a bunch of it here. People hated me here. People loved me here. And it's gotten all the way up to 120 and fell back to 94. Remember, I was telling people to sell it in here. I think it probably does come back here. But the point is look how long it took to do what it did. So on these growth stocks, you have to be patient. You have to understand the long term. You have to keep up with the competition. SunPower made some pretty important changes a few years ago, and then made even more important changes last year to focus on commercial. If you drive around the country, you'll notice that there's companies all over America that are putting solar panels on their buildings. If you go through industrial parks like I do, because and the people I travel with they just tolerate it at this point. They know what's going to happen. You'll see factories and warehouses getting solar panels now. We already know about the Walmarts and Kohl's and Google and Apple and all of them doing solar. SunPower is the leader in commercial, which I think is the sweet spot for a while, because I think it's going to take a time for it to hit residential. And I think the utilities have a limited upside. Now, I think the utilities are going to be great for solar, which is actually not in the middle of its market right now. It's just starting to come off a bottom. So if you see the monthly just starting to turn up. Why? Because we know the utilities are going to start wiping out the coal-fired power plants, and they're mainly going to get replaced with solar, has been the trend. So the utilities will carry first solar up. I was hoping to get it around 50. I don't know if we'll get there, right? 200-day moving average, we might. Could take another clunk down here. See, that's a pretty good support level. Doesn't mean it can't get down to these support levels, 40. But 50 is probably, that first support level we talked about, and then your bottom fishing down around 40. Because of the political environment, while I would probably nibble at 50, I'd be very patient, and I've said this a number of times, we really want to look for the bottom fishing prices. In the very short term, it looks like we could get that sell-off. End phase, monthly is falling off a cliff. Weekly is still selling off, hasn't quite finished. Daily is pretty beat up, and it's now just about oversold. Not quite, but almost. So it too filled its gap almost. As of today, it looks like it's within about $3 or $4. Again, I think that 20-ish is where we look at end phase. Doesn't mean it can't go all the way down to 12-ish. I think you get your nibbles in here because the future is so bright. If it breaks through there, then you need to wait all the way down to around 12. Competitor to end phase, Solar Edge, starting to come back on the monthly. Weekly is tailing off. Daily looks like it could turn over too. So with Solar Edge, looks like upper 60s is where we should be targeting for nibbles. Now, you notice all these charts have these two things. It's because it's industry driven. But it could, if we really have a recessionary impulse, come all the way down here if we get that big sell-off. So again, nibbles, big chunks. I want to talk about Generac. Here's a good chart. Clearly, people who got in early and understood what was going on started buying Generac ahead of their news to break into the market with Solar Edge and Enphase for solar inverters. This stock has run way up. It's gotten overbought. It's approaching overbought again. It's turning over a little bit now, though, on the daily. That's important for day traders. The weekly, though, pretty elevated. Can't get much higher than that. The monthly looks to be maxing out too. So with Generac, it really looks like a correction down into this range, right? Just color this all in. Dunk, 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 dunk. How long will it take? Again, it depends how fast the market has a negative reaction to something economic or political. But Generac approaching 60 would be really interesting to me. All right, somebody asked about Terraform Power, formerly associated with Sun Edison, now owned by Brookfield Asset Management. And on the monthly, look how much that's run. So probably not a lot of room left to run. We'll talk about the company in a second. Weekly, again, not a lot of room left to run. Daily, kind of in the middle. So not a lot of room to run to the upside. And it's kind of in the middle on the daily for the traders. What do you think the traders are going to push it? Where do you think they'll push it? They're going to push it down, right? Because they know that on these longer time frames, not a lot of upside, and the stock is, look here, very overbought. Okay, so while I like this company, I don't like it at these prices. And why is that? Well, I was scrolling through this before we went on today, and just kind of looking at their distribution of business. Here's one that's important for you to understand this big trend. The split for them on wind to solar capacity is 64-36, but it's heading towards solar being a little more than half. We've talked about this before. Solar installations are exceeding wind installations by more than 2 to 1 now. Coal-fired power plants are being shuttered. I guess there's like 5 of them now, and they're going mainly to solar. Why? The price of solar just continues to come down, batteries continue to get better, and now it looks like we have a replacement, at least on larger scale batteries, at least 2 different ways to replace lithium. Smaller batteries probably sticking with lithium. But as technology gets better, the replacements for lithium will get smaller as well. The battleground is with cars. Will cars stick with lithium batteries 3, 4, 5 years from now? Or will they go to a different type of battery? I'm virtually certain that lithium ends up not powering the second and third generations of electric vehicles. So while we need the lithium now for electric vehicles in the initial phases of that industry, they're going to replace the lithium batteries with something less toxic, lighter, with all the power potential, needing to transfer the energy quickly. Probably in the next 2 to 4 years, but 5 or 6 years on the outside. So why is that important? Well, because we also have average Nutrien since they got their share. So Nutrien sold at a high. Potash should own that. They had to divest it when they merged with Agrium. Excuse me, I'm not good at using the cough button yet. I'll try to edit that out. So down here at 67, is this company a buy? I don't think so, not yet. Why? Because I think that the capacity for lithium is going to go up at a time when the demand goes down. So we know that there's more lithium mines coming on in the next 3-4 old mining. And I think probably this stock is going to come off of my list because I don't think it has that margin of safety anymore. The technology on batteries, like almost everything else with the green revolution here, an alternative energy revolution, is just moving way faster than I think people gave it credit for. The end of the oil age, the end of the coal age, the end of the fossil fuel age is happening much faster than I think anybody, 99% of the people thought it would happen. And I was one of the more aggressive ones. And it's happening faster than I thought. So I'm adjusting as an investor. All right, so if you want, go take a look at the Terraform PowerPoint. It's a pretty good one. There was one other chart in here that I thought was interesting. I'll think of it later. But I'm going to write about the solar industry quite a bit coming up. Oh, this here. Remember when I said earlier that I didn't think Trump and Pelosi would agree to do much between now and the election? Here's one thing that would be great to extend is the solar tax credit. But do we think it'll happen? Probably not. It's another reason to think the solar stocks maybe are choppy in the short run because not a lot is going to get done on the policy front. My guess is that if those stocks sell off in the future, this tax credit will come back, 2021, 2022, something. And it'll be part of the Green New Deal, which will be a lot more watered down and policy driven and tax code driven than government spending driven, which is what I said is the right way to do it. So these stocks could correct off because this is probably not going to happen. And as they correct off, we just have to pick the two spots where we want to buy. Now, when you scale in, a lot of people go, oh, it went down a couple of dollars. I'll buy more. I'll buy more. I'll buy more. It's called martingale. You don't want that. You need to have a plan for when you're going to buy in. Where are the price levels that look like they could hold and turn around? Pivot points is where you make money. A lot of smart investors have said that. So you look for the pivot points. This is a pivot point, right around 65. It might not work. Okay, so where's the next pivot point? It's not $1 or $2 lower. It's way down here in the upper 40s. So that's where you look. And these are pretty obvious charts. Other charts aren't this easy, I don't think. So 65-ish on Solar Edge, and then 45-ish. All right. Any Q&A you guys want to do here before we call it a weekend? No? All right. So I am making some major changes to my investment firm. I'm going to take even fewer accounts, and I'm only going to really manage retirement money and special accounts. So folks who have a very specific investment need or goal, you'll see that on my Blue Mound Asset Management website. I think that Occidental is, like I said, one of those dozen or so oil companies that I think are just really well positioned. Does it matter? Doesn't matter that they're really well positioned for the next 20 years. I think it does, but we'll see. So somebody wants to ask about Elizabeth Warren. I'll talk about that off when I turn the recording off. But I'll talk about it now. I think Elizabeth Warren has a lot more support on Wall Street than what the headlines from the Wall Street Journal tell you. She is not a socialist, not even close, very pro-market. However, she believes in smart taxes and smart regulations, which I think is probably pretty smart. So I think she would tilt things away from the big guys and more towards the little guys. And in my opinion, because I think entrepreneurship is what drives this country, I think you want a system that doesn't allow the big guys to crush the little guys. That's where innovation comes from. Let the little guys innovate. Some of them will become big guys, some of them will get bought out. But if you prevent that innovation because regulations and tax policies overwhelmingly favor the big and established, then you lose innovation and entrepreneurship. And that can lead to a very bad financial outcome for the whole country, because we know that jobs come from the little guys that become big guys. Same type of thing with investing, right? Small companies become big companies if they stay in business. So you find those. All right, thoughts on CRC? Is it California? Yeah, I just don't. I've never liked these guys. Never liked these guys. I know they got spun off by, was it Conoco or Occidental years ago. I've never liked these guys. I think the chart supports my view. No, Oxy wasn't a spinoff. Occidental, well, I mean, if they were, it was 30 years ago. But CRC spun off of either Occidental or Conoco. I can't remember which. Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, like I said, I don't remember who California Resources spun off of. It was either Occidental or Conoco, I believe. All right, let's call it a weekend. I'm going to try to get caught up here by Sunday. Probably means Wednesday. See you in the chats on Monday and Wednesday. And like I said, I think that we're going to do pretty good here. Maintain your asset allocations. Be conservative. Don't reach out too much for risk right now. The political landscape is not healthy. Regardless of what party you're in, it's just not healthy. And I think that we have to be aware that there is a significant risk that the President of the United States is impeached. May or may not happen. I'm not arguing really in either direction. I give you my opinion, but I'm not going to argue it. It's just that it's becoming more likely that it can happen now. So read some of these articles that I put up. I'll actually probably do a summary post. And take care. Have a great weekend.